Hi, I'm Dave Engelbretson, and along with Leroy Hyatt, we'd like to welcome you to another edition of Fly Tying, The Angler's Art. And I'm excited about today's program. We've got a variety of things, but we're going to start with my all-time favorite hatch matching dry fly, the Sulfur done, right. Absolutely. And we'll talk more about that as we go. We're also going to tie a Warden's Worry streamer, and then we're going to come to a fly that was developed here in Idaho. It's called the Stayner duck, and it's both a bass and a trout fly, which is kind of an odd combination. We're going to start with this pale sulfur dun. As I said, it's one of my favorite hatches. It comes off in the east about the end of May, somewhere around the 20th of May. It's a long hatch. It comes off steadily for maybe 7 or 8 weeks. It's never a huge hatch, but the flies trickle off during the day for a couple of hours. And I think the thing that I liked about it is it's so pretty. It's a pretty little fly, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about the materials.
Have you ever used the fly here?
I never have. I haven't run into anything that it would match, so I never have. Okay. But why don't you tell us about the materials, and we'll get on with the fly, and then we'll talk a little more about it.
For the sulfur dry, we'll use a pale ginger hackle. We'll use this for the hackle and the tailing material. The wing will be a natural gray duck flank feather. The body material we've blended up right here. It's an orange and a yellow that we've just blended together. And the thread is a standard 6/0 yellow tying thread.
Now the sulfur, what we call the sulfur, really can match a variety of yellowish insects.
Oh, I'm sure it could.
And it could be tied size 14, 16, 18, depending on which species, of course, you're trying to match in your area.
I have a size 14 in the vise now. I have mashed the barb down. It's just a standard dry fly hook. I'll take this mallard flank, and we'll pull off this bottom section. Don't need it at all. Very similar to what we've done in the past with wood duck. And they do make nice little wings. Now you can see the curvature of the feather just has a natural curve. I'm going to put it in so it is up like that. Now that's the way I've done it. Is that the way you've done it in the past?
I always do it that way. Now, of course, probably the original wing called for hackle point wings.
That could well be.
Gray hackle point wings, but I like the divided mallard just as well.
What I've done is I pulled that back too far. I'm going to tie it in and pull it so I get the right length on it, but when I pulled it, the whole thread slipped back, and I don't want that. Then I'll get it about the right length of where I want it.
And as always, we tied it in about 1/3 of the hook shank back from the eye to leave plenty of room for hackle and a head.
Yes. And then I'm going to just take a wrap or two here in front and make sure that stood up in the air, and then I'm going to divide it as evenly as I can.
And again, we keep saying it, but for people that have missed shows, it bears repeating that the height of your wing should stand up about 1/4 taller than the hackle, and the hackle should be 1.5 to 2 times the gap of the hook. If you make your wing about the length of the hook shank, that seems to work out about right.
About the same length as the tail material will be.
Yeah.
And there's the wing tied in. Now I'll run my thread to the rear. I got one wing straggler here. And I'm going to tie the tail material. I want this material about the same length as the shank of the hook. I'll just stick it in and measure it. Clip off what I don't need. I'm going to run up and touch that to the wing material.
And remember when you tie in your tails to make a loose loop over the tail, then squeeze tightly as you pull the thread straight down, and do that several times, and that'll ensure that the tail is tight on top of the hook and doesn't roll to the side, and pull it nicely together. Now, while you're doing that dubbing in the usual sparse fashion, I'm going to say that we blend this. This was soft rabbit furred yellow and orange, and if the yellow is too bright, we can tone it down, make it paler by putting some white in there. And we've found that the body color varies from stream to stream, and sometimes those little bugs, when they're flying up against the sky and you see the light hitting them, they look like little fire coals up there.
Oh, really?
And so we tie a variety of shades of bodies, some with more orange in than others, for the different streams. But they're so pretty when they're flying, and it's just like these little hot coals flying around. And when, as long as we're talking about it, I might as well say, too, that when we put the hackle in, the hackle calls for cream or pale ginger, which we're going to use. But we also found, and this was George Harvey's discovery, that putting a couple of turns of orange hackle in with the pale ginger really...
Oh, tie them in together?
Yeah. Well, two hackles. You wrap the primary hackle of the pale cream, and then you put the second hackle in, just a couple of turns of orange.
Oh, just in the front?
Well, no, you know, as you wind through, you can wind it through, but only 2 or 3 turns. You don't want an orange hackle, but you want the cream hackle with a hint of orange to it.
Which would kind of match that body.
Match the body, and we found that it made it a more effective fly for some reason, and so I rarely tied my sulfurs without that little bit of orange hackle.
Huh. Well, what I've done, I've taken about 2 turns, 3 maybe, of the hackle material behind the wing. I'll get rid of that little tip right there. Take another loose wrap. Then I'll start again with the next hackle. I'm going to do 1 wrap now behind that first hackle I just put in.
Yeah,
and
I don't
then
think
start
we've mentioned
forward.
it in this series of shows, but when you're using 2 hackles, it's very helpful to have the stem of the second hackle just a little bit longer, so that when you start to wrap, you're first wrapping stem without the fibers, and it helps set everything up. And
keeps the fibers upright.
Keeps the fibers upright. And so just stagger your stem length a little bit with the second stem a hair longer.
Now I'll get rid of a few stragglers that I've got here.
Yeah, and your last turns of that second hackle went in front of the first hackle.
Right in front of the first.
Make a little head, and we're going to have it.
And I'll take the little whip tool. There it is. Get rid of that thread. And I never clip with my scissors. Just run a blade in on the thread, and it'll go right off. Put a little drop of head cement on it, and we'll be through with this sulfur
pattern. This might be a good time to put a little black background behind that fly as we take a final look at it, because it is a light fly. Show up against that dark background pretty well, I think. There it is. Oh, I hope everybody can run into a sulfur hatch sometime.
Well, that completes that sulfur dry pattern. We've used the pale ginger for the hackle and the tail. We've used the mallard flank feather for the wing, and the special blend of yellow and orange dubbing for the body material.
Next, we're going to tie a very old, popular streamer pattern.
Did this come from England originally?
I don't think so. As far as I know, it probably was developed in the East. I originally ran into it in Joe Book's streamer book, which is kind of the authority of the streamers. It's called the Warden's Worry, and I guess the thing that attracted it to me was I liked the name, the Warden's Worry. And it is a good all-around streamer, any place you fish streamers, and I think it's a good one to include here. So, Leroy, why don't you tell us what we're going to use to tie the Warden's Worry? Okay.
We'll use the standard brown bucktail. These come in a lot of colors, but we'll just use the regular tan one. We'll use a yellow hackle for the throat material. We'll use a red hackle for the tailing. Now, you could use a red duck quail for this. I like the red hackle better. There will be a tag of gold tinsel. There will be a rib. The tag is flat. The rib will be an oval gold. The body material, you could use yellow chenille, or in this case, we've taken some yellow and orange and blended it together. It is predominantly yellow, but you can see orange in it, and I'll use the standard black 6/0 thread. I've pinched the barb down on a size 8 4X long hook, standard streamer hook, and we'll dress the hook shank with thread and go to the rear. Now the first thing I'll tie on will be the flat tinsel tag. And this isn't a real big tag at all. It's just something to give the fly a little color, a little sparkle to that back section. And I'll start down over to the rear, almost to the bend. I don't want to go down over the bend on this one at all. I like a tag to just show a little curvature. Yes. Well, this one started down just a little. No, I think that's great. That's exactly the way I like to see them. And I'll fold that back over and clip it off. Now I'll take just one of these red hackles. Now, as you said, the original did call for duck quill section. Tail.
But the problem with that is it's not very durable.
No.
And you cast it a bit or you catch a few fish and it splits all up, even when you treat it with the fixative.
And it wants to come apart on you.
So I much prefer to use hackle fibers, or even in some cases with some streamers, a few bucktail fibers. But on this fly, the red hackle is very appropriate.
Now I'll tie in a little piece of this oval gold. Looks like I have considerably more than I need. I was going to say, you could probably put a rib on an elephant with all that. Yeah, probably could. And then we'll start off with the dubbing.
Now here again, the original pattern in Joe Bates' book, I'm certain called for yellow chenille.
That could be.
But I know I tried a lot of them that way, but I know the book you had in Leiser's book called for the yellow-orange blend, actually, of hare's mask. But we didn't have any yellow-orange hare's mask, so we made this blending of rabbit, and
now I'm going to go.
Will be just fine.
Well, I'm going to go behind that rib. That way, that rib I know is going to stay right on top. It will not fall off the back side of that. And just start forward with this.
And here again, we like to have this body not tapered as much as just a uniform.
No, fairly flat.
And fairly uniform body.
And one more little section ought to do it.
Of course, this is where the chenille goes so fast.
Much
you can
quicker.
Just crank that body out in a hurry with yellow chenille.
But yet, on the other hand, this dubbing does give it a whole different appearance.
Oh, it makes a nice translucent appearance, yeah. And this points out the fact that, you know, these patterns, while the original patterns call for certain things, they're not necessarily set in stone, and if you don't have the right materials, make an appropriate substitute.
Go with your own. Now I'll palmer this, I'll rib this.
Do you rib it in the same direction? I usually counter wrap mine so that it doesn't sink into the
Well, this is staying on top pretty well. I could counter wrap it. Would you like that
Well,
better?
that's the way I do it. I don't care, whichever way you're comfortable, but I always find it does two things. It does not sink into the material and disappear, and it also helps firm up the body, bind things down. So again, either way, it's a matter of personal technique.
With chenille, it would definitely disappear down in there if you wrapped it the same way.
With chenille, you definitely want to counter wrap it.
There's that part of it. A little bit of straggler sticking out. I'll tie him down. Then we have the yellow hackle. Now there's lots of different ways you could do this one also. You could just, if you have a rotary vise, you could turn the vise over and just tie this on as a beard. This is another way to do it. I just tie it in up here on top. I still have left my little bit of a hackle stem, bare stem here. And then I'm just going to take about 1.5 wraps. That's all I want on there.
Now another trick when you're tying wet fly type material is not to tie the hackle in by the butt, but to tie it in by the tip. And that gives sort of a natural slant backwards to the fibers.
Now what I'm going to do is just pull all of this down with my thumb and finger and just wrap back over it slightly. What that's going to do is make, well, most of it go down. I'll just clip off the ones that want to stay up on top. And that will make the basic same little beard as if you were going to do it pulling it underneath. Then we'll take a section of small bucktail, or tan bucktail, and here you do not need a whole lot of this bucktail material. A lot of people do not stack this. I'll get all that under fur and short stuff out of it. I like to stack it just to make it look a little neater.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll put it in the stacker, and we'll give it, if I can get it all in, and give it a couple of quick tamps, and it should fairly well even itself out.
Now, generally, I tie that wing about to the end of the tail. I don't know what you do.
Pretty close. Pretty close.
That's the proportion I try to get.
Now, here's a little trick. If you have trouble with this hair rotating around the hook, I'll come with my thread and take a loop just around the hair wing. Then I'll lower it back down.
Without going through your thumb and finger?
Yes. All I am is just around the hair. Then I'll put the wing back on the hook, and now I'll come around everything. That first little wrap on there will actually bind that a whole lot tighter and not let it slip like
You
some
know,
of them.
I always put that on, like we mentioned another time, like the tail, I was putting that loose loop through your thumb and finger, and then squeezing tightly together with your thumb and fingers, you pull the thread straight down, which also works.
That's just another
way.
Whichever way you feel more comfortable
And we've said
with.
this before, fly tying is a lot of little tricks, and different people do different ways. There is no right or wrong way, and that's the nice part about watching other tyers and always learn a couple of new tricks.
Look at all the books that are out there. I'll get the thread
we're
off.
running a little long here. Maybe we can just skip the head cement. Tell people that we use it, but why don't we cover those materials again and get on to the next
We'll
slide.
use the brown bucktail for the wing, the yellow hackle for the throat, the yellow-orange dubbing, the red hackle, and the gold tinsel tag.
And let's look at the fly as we're going out there. You can see it. Our last fly today is going to be one that really is a nationally prominent fly. It's been fished all over the world, but it was developed here in Idaho by a gentleman by the name of Stayner from Twin Falls. It's called the Stayner duck, and it's a popular fly actually for trout and bass. Now you said...
in fact, the guy that told me about the fly told me that all he ever caught on was bass. Well, I had been using it before, and I said, well, Bill, all I've ever caught on it is trout. He says, I've never caught a trout. So it will work for you.
It'll go either way. You know, Rule had this great little shop down in Twin Falls. I was in it one time, and it pleased me to see a shop that looked like my fly tying room. There was junk piled and stacked everywhere.
Heard that.
And,
but he knew where everything
Rule
was.
was a real character, and he could put his hand on anything. Well, let's tell us about the Stayner duck.
All right. We'll use an olive chenille for this fly. We'll use an orange hackle for the tail and throat. Now, I have used orange calf tail for this too, but the original pattern did call for the orange hackle. It'll have a rib of the oval gold. The wing will be a natural mallard flank feather, and I will use black 6/0 thread. I have a 2x long hook in the vise. I have pinched the barb. It is about a size 8, and I will dress the entire shank like always.
You did say 8 2x long.
8 2x long. Then we'll just take a little piece, one of these for the tail. Get rid of some of that stuff on the bottom. I have no idea what this represents. My guess is with this orange in here for bass, my assumption would be they're going to take it for a crayfish, but I don't know that. I have not a clue, but I know that they do very well with it for bass. Now I'll take a piece of the the olive chenille.
It's interesting that you mentioned bass because I never heard of it for that. But I have, of course, do know how effective it is for trout.
It really
now,
is.
When we're talking bass here, we're really talking smallmouth.
Smallmouth, that's correct. I don't know about largemouth. It could work for largemouth.
I don't know.
In the high mountain lakes, in some of the even low lakes, this fly can be really good, effective fly at times.
Well, you know, I've been doing a lot more smallmouth fishing in this past year, and it never occurred to me to try the fly.
Oh, really?
But
you try it next time.
I will, yeah.
Now I'm going to take a wrap of this olive chenille behind the rib again. I like to do that to make sure that rib stays where it's supposed to stay. Then we'll just quickly run this forward, tie it off on top. Now with the chenille, I'm going to reverse wrap this rib.
It's particularly important here because the rib will get lost in the turns of chenille the other way.
But you can see how that makes just a really nice little segmented body. Take a few wraps of this, make sure it's bound good. And then this one, I'm going to turn the hook upside down to put the throat on. If you don't have a rotary vise, you can do as we've done in other shows, just tie a turn or two and pull the whole thing down. This is just another way to do it.
Well, it's nice we just tied the Warden's worry, showing them the other way, where
That's
you
correct.
make a collar and pull it down. Here's another way of doing it.
So I'll just lay that
And
in
actually,
there.
you can tie that beard in without turning the vise upside down.
You can pull
I
it
lay
over.
it crossways under there and let the thread twist it into position, and it's sometimes a little awkward, but it's not hard to do.
Got a couple that don't want to come out. Isn't that always the way it is?
It is for me.
Yeah. And then for the mallard duck wing, this is a simple little wing. It just lays on top of the hook, just flat, just like your little roof would be.
You know,
I'll tie
another
it
feather that works very well on smaller wings is the breast feather from a teal,
Oh,
because they're more heavily banded, more heavily marked. And when you're tying smaller flies, that teal breast feather makes a really nice little wing.
Oh, I bet it would.
I don't think it's probably long enough to do on a bigger streamer like this, but it's something to keep in mind if you have access to teal.
Now, I've seen people trim this wing off very short and flat. I
really?
usually kind of leave mine on a little bit on the long side.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it almost could represent a streamer. It could maybe represent a wet fly. I don't know. But it is a super fly. I have had some phenomenal days with this fly. Now I'll put a drop of head cement on it. Make sure it's all bound together nicely.
You know, I hate to complain about this light tan shirt of yours. It's a beautiful shirt, and gosh, it says Celebrity Fly Tyer and everything else on it. But it is a little hard to see some of these flies we've tied in this show. So, again, when you're finished, let's put this black background behind it.
I'll put the black background up to it.
There, we can see it.
And now you can see what the Stayner duck
Stayner
looks
duck.
like. There's the red hackle, or the orange hackle tail fibers for the tail and for the hackle, the throat. The olive chenille body ribbed with oval gold tinsel, and a mallard flank wing.
You know, Leroy, we've got just a little bit of extra time today. Why don't we take another look at each one of those flies, critique the flies, and maybe give the viewers a few hints on what to look for and how to improve the flies they tie. Let's start with that sulfur.
First one
let's put
we
a background in there.
Okay, now really the fly is not a bad shaped fly. If I did the next one, I would make that body material just a little bit sparser, which would make the body thinner. The wing position is good. Absolutely no problem with that at all.
Hackle size is nice.
Hackle size is nice.
I think, for my taste, I'd like to have the tail not quite flared as much.
Okay.
Some people intentionally do that, so it's a matter of choice.
Personal choice there.
They like the flared tail to give it a little broader support, but I just like the appearance of it the other way.
Let's go with the Warden's Worry.
Warden's Worry?
Not a bad fly at all. If you turn the vise over and look over here on this side, right here you can see some thread. The tail is on top, not a problem here, but I just didn't get the body material back there far enough. Won't hurt a thing, but that's just one thing to look for your flies, for that Warden's Worry.
Let's put in the last one. You know, if your fly tying is going to improve, you have to be critical of every one you tie. Take it out of the vise and say, what could I have done better to improve this fly?
Absolutely.
And if you do that, you will become a better tyer.
And now with
very quickly, let's
the
wrap this one
Stayner
up.
duck, the only thing I don't like about this one, when I tied it, I left a little bit of that mallard flank sticking out of the front wraps. Will not hurt a thing. It's just a total matter of show, but that's one thing I would change on the next one.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up. And again, we hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you've learned something and some new techniques. And please, if you want to improve your fly tying, be critical of every single fly you tie.
Absolutely.
What can I do next time to make the next one better?
Don't be a good enough tyer.
Good enough isn't. That's my saying. Good enough isn't. Well, that's it for tonight, and we thank you for looking in on us, and we hope to see you again next week, and we'll carry on again. Good night.
Dave and Leroy have produced a new 90-minute video on fly tying techniques. To order a copy, call the number on your screen. These tips are only $28.95 plus $3.95 shipping and handling. Please have your credit card ready and call 1-800-883-0124 to order fly tying techniques. You can also order the programs in this series. There are 3 programs on each 90-minute tape for $22.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-883-0124 and order your fly tying videos or the techniques tape.